Hey everyone! Before we dive into this heartwarming and emotional story, take a moment to let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing from you. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an incredible story like this one. This is a tale of kindness, resilience, and the power of human connection. What happens when a struggling single mother crosses paths with a legend known not just for his basketball skills, but for his big heart? Stay tuned, because this story will move you in ways you never expected. Now, let's begin. The morning air was crisp, the kind that bit at your skin and made you wish you had stayed in bed. Snowflakes floated down lazily, dusting the busy streets of Atlanta. Inside Maple Cafe, the warmth of fresh coffee and the scent of buttery pancakes filled the air. The little diner wasn't anything fancy, but it had been around for years, a place where people came to escape the cold, share stories, or just grab a bite before heading off to work. Shaquille O'Neal, or as most of the world knew him, Big Shaq, walked in, ducking slightly as he stepped through the cafe's entrance. Even in a city filled with celebrities, Shaq's presence still turned heads. His towering frame, deep voice, and larger-than-life personality made him impossible to ignore. But he wasn't here for the attention. He was just looking for a quiet morning, maybe a stack of pancakes and some coffee to start his day. The cafe was half full, a mix of early risers, college students, and blue-collar workers trying to warm up before their shifts. Shaq found a corner booth, one that gave him a good view of the room, but still kept him somewhat hidden. He liked watching people, observing life, and today his eyes settled on a young woman sitting at the counter. She was bundled up in an oversized coat that had seen better days. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, strands falling out, framing her tired face. In her arms she cradled a baby, maybe 6 months old, wrapped in a thin, faded blanket. The baby stirred, whimpering softly. The woman bounced her knee slightly, whispering something soothing, but the baby wasn't having it. Shaq watched as she looked around, hesitant. Her fingers tapped against the counter, her gaze drifting toward the menu. A moment later, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a few crumpled dollar bills, and smoothed them out with shaky fingers. She did a quick count, then bit her lip. The waitress, an older woman named Gloria, came over. "Morning, honey. What can I get you?" The young mother hesitated, glancing down at her baby. Just a small coffee, please." Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Shock saw the way Gloria's expression changed. A flicker of concern, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking. She nodded, poured the coffee, and placed it in front of the woman. "Need anything else?" The young mother shook her head quickly. "No, ma'am, this is fine." Shaq felt something tighten in his chest. He knew that look. He had seen it before. The look of someone who was too proud to ask for help but was struggling. His mama had worn that look when he was a kid. There were days when she would skip meals just so he could eat. He remembered the nights she went to bed hungry, making sure he had enough. He glanced at the baby, now fussing louder, tiny hands waving in the air. The young mother bounced her knee again, whispering soft reassurances, but Shaq could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the quiet desperation. He waved over Gloria, leaning in slightly. "Hey, Glo, what's her story?" Gloria sighed, glancing back at the young woman. "Her name's Rachel. Been coming in the last couple of weeks. Doesn't order much. Sometimes just sits here with the baby, warms up, then leaves. Nice girl. But I got a feeling things ain't easy for her." Shaq nodded, watching as Rachel took tiny sips of her coffee, probably making it last as long as she could. The baby let out a frustrated cry, and she quickly rocked him, her movements full of love but also exhaustion. He wasn't just fussing, he was hungry. Shaq leaned back, rubbing his chin. He had made millions, played on the biggest stages, been treated like a king, but at his core he was still a mama's boy, raised by a woman who had done everything to make sure he never went without. And right now, in this little cafe, he saw a mother doing the same. He made up his mind. He wasn't just going to sit here and watch, he was going to help. Shaq pushed his plate aside, his mind made up. He wasn't the kind of man who watched people struggle when he had the power to make a difference. He waved Gloria over again, his deep voice low but firm. "Glo, bring her something to eat. Get the baby something, too." Gloria hesitated, looking over at Rachel, who was still gently rocking her fussy child. "Shaq, I don't know if she'd accept it. She's got that pride, you know?" Gloria pursed her lips but nodded. She walked over to Rachel, setting a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and a side of fruit in front of her. "This is on the house, sweetheart," she said gently. "A customer paid for it before they left." Rachel's tired eyes widened. "Oh, no, I can't. I just—" "Honey, it's already covered," Gloria said firmly, patting Rachel's hand. "Don't let it go to waste." Rachel hesitated, looking down at the plate. Her stomach clenched at the sight and smell of warm food, but guilt flashed across her face. "I don't know how to thank—" "No need," Gloria said with a wink. "Eat up." Shaq watched from his seat as Rachel picked up the fork with trembling hands, bringing a bite of food to her mouth. The relief in her expression hit him hard. The baby, sensing the shift, calmed slightly, his tiny hands grasping at his mother's coat. Shaq wasn't done. He had more to do, and he knew just how to do it. Rachel took slow bites, savoring each mouthful like it was a rare delicacy. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and her body was thanking her for it. The baby, now quieter, watched her with big, curious eyes. Shaq took a deep breath and stood up, walking over to the counter. He pulled out the stool next to Rachel and sat down. She turned slightly, surprised by the presence of the massive man next to her. "You mind if I sit here?" Shaq asked, his voice warm but deep. Rachel hesitated but nodded. "It's a free country?" Shaq chuckled. "That it is." He looked down at the baby. "Cute kid." Rachel gave a tired smile. "His name is Oliver." "Nice name," Shaq said. He glanced at her plate. "Food okay?" She nodded slowly. "It's really good. I don't know how to thank whoever paid for it." Shaq smiled. "Let's just say some people don't like seeing good folks struggle." Rachel looked at Shaq, her eyes wary but grateful. She still couldn't believe a man like him was sitting next to her, taking an interest in her struggles. "You're really kind," she said softly, adjusting Oliver's blanket. "Most people just look the other way." Shaq shrugged. "I was raised to never ignore people in need, especially moms. My mama, she did everything for me. She'd want me to help." Rachel looks down at her coffee, stirring it absent-mindedly. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." Shaq leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter. "Let me do more. Where are you staying?" Rachel hesitated. "A shelter downtown. It's not great, but it's better than the streets." Shaq exhaled, shaking his head. He had seen too many people struggling in this city, too many who just needed a break. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I know a place, a women's shelter, better than where you're at. They help with jobs, daycare, getting you back on your feet. I can make a call." Rachel's lips trembled. "You do that? For me?" Shaq nodded. "Yeah, and not just that." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a stack of bills, placing them on the counter. "This is for you. Get what you need for Oliver. Diapers, formula, clothes, whatever you need." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes. She stared at the money, then up at Shaq, her voice shaking. Shaq, I can't take this." "Yes, you can," Shaq said firmly. "This isn't charity. This is one parent helping another." Rachel covered her mouth with her hand, trying to suppress the sob that rose in her throat. Gloria, watching from behind the counter, wiped at her own eyes. The entire café had gone quiet, witnessing the moment of pure kindness. Shaq reached out, gently patting Oliver's tiny hand. "You're not alone, Rachel. You and Oliver are going to be okay." Rachel sat in the back seat of Shaq's car, her hands trembling slightly as she held Oliver close to her chest. The warmth of the heater filled the vehicle, a stark contrast to the cold uncertainty that had defined her life for the past few months. Gloria had packed up a small bag of food from the cafe, insisting she take it with her. And now, for the first time in a long time, Rachel felt something close to hope. Shaq navigated through the city streets with ease, the glow of streetlights reflecting in his rearview mirror. "The place we're going to," he said, glancing at Rachel. "It's not just a shelter, it's a transitional home. They help women get jobs, provide child care, counseling, whatever you need to get back on your feet." Rachel nodded slowly. I don't know how to thank you." Shaq smiled, keeping his eyes on the road. "You don't have to. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "When you get back on your feet, help the next person. That's how this works." Rachel felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were from the overwhelming realization that someone, this giant of a man with a heart just as big, had chosen to see her when the world had looked away. They pulled up to a well-lit building with a welcoming sign that read, "New Horizons Women's Center." The front door opened, and a kind-looking woman in a navy blue coat stepped out to greet them. "Shaq, good to see you again." Shaq grinned, stepping out of the car and shaking her hand. "Hey, Linda, got someone here who could use a fresh start?" Linda peered inside the car, offering Rachel a warm smile. "You must be Rachel. Come inside, sweetheart. We'll get you and Oliver settled." Rachel hesitated for just a moment, but then she looked at Oliver's peaceful face. She took a deep breath, held him tighter, and stepped out of the car. Shaq handed Linda an envelope, lowering his voice. "This should cover whatever they need for a while. Make sure she gets the best care." Linda nodded, understanding. "You got it." Rachel turned to Shaq one last time. "I won't forget this." Shaq crouched down slightly, smiling at Oliver. "You two take care, and remember, this ain't the end. It's just the beginning." Rachel let out a shaky breath, then nodded. "I'll pay it forward." Shaq watched as she walked into the building, disappearing into the warmth and safety of a new chance at life. He stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, before turning back toward his car. Another life changed, another step forward. As he pulled away, the city lights shining in the distance, he couldn't help but smile. Some moments in life weren't about money, fame, or success. Some moments were just about doing what was right.